Good morning, guys. So many people are asking about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So I thought I'd go to a resident scientist who's cuddled up here with various pillows and blankets on a Saturday morning. Playing a video game or doing work, hon? Okay. So real quick, how do you feel about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? We know your feelings on the mRNA ones. So can you just tell us very quickly your thoughts on this J&J one that most people, probably most of my readers, are in a demographic where that will be the one they are offered?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be struggling with this idea that should I wait for a mRNA based one? I think if I'm frank, if I had an appointment for a mRNA based one next week and an offer to do the J&J today, I would wait a week. But absent a scenario like that, I think it's important for everyone to take the dose that they can get their hands on, and it's effective. I think it's most impressive about it is that it's reduced the deaths to effectively zero, I think. And so you can expect the hospitalizations to be vastly reduced and serious illness to be reduced. So get it, and then it'll move us all closer to a herd immunity.
I think I saw that it's basically 100% effective against dying of COVID. Does that square with what you've read? Like if you get the J&J, you might be thinking, it's only 70%, not 95%. First of all, I read that that's not totally fair because the J&J one had to do the trials with these new variants that are potentially more virulent and definitely more contagious. So it's possible that the impressive results of the mRNA ones were more impressive because we didn't have those other variants in circulation. So it's possible that there's less of a gap in efficacy between them. And then even if there is that gap, I assume you agree that if the goal really is to not get sick and die of COVID, then they're all accomplishing that successfully.
Agree. I think that you're going to have to get out to the big numbers before you make a claim about deaths. In a trial like this, we're talking about tens of thousands of people.
Okay.
It's still a lot, and there were 0 deaths. But when you break down the numbers, we're talking about there were 112 cases of COVID diagnosed in the placebo and 40 in the other. It's the scale of the numbers is like that. So when we get out to the millions, I think we will see that people who are vaccinated can probably die, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. The bottom line,
but it will be very, very, very vanishingly small, as your mom said. Hopefully.
Vanishingly small. That's a big claim. The key is, I think, to just consider in terms of the facts is that the AstraZeneca and the J&J are in one bin, and then the Pfizer and the Moderna are in another, and they're effectively twins of each other. The J&J and AstraZeneca are very similar. So you can extrapolate the numbers from both of those, and the totality of the numbers on the Moderna and Pfizer are very impressive, and the AstraZeneca and J&J I think are similarly in line with each other. Okay. So yeah.
It sounds like you're saying that you do think the mod RNA ones on the individual level are probably more effective.
I think they're more effective.
And I would like to say, after seeing you after your second dose, the Pfizer and the the mod RNA ones, Pfizer and Moderna, do come with it seems like most people do have some short-term unpleasant side effects from those. And what I've read is that the Johnson & Johnson is going to be much more like a typical flu shot. You're unlikely to have those unpleasant side effects. So that, for me, falls in the plus category.
That's right. And one shot. So
one shot is huge. Having to only do it once is huge.
Yeah, it's hard to give advice because it's a public health.
Right, like if you have a choice.
Versus an individual choice question.
Yes. But I also know I don't want to not touch on the safety of the vaccines because people reading this are probably less concerned with the efficacy of the shot and more concerned with, okay, but what about you just maybe convinced some of us that mod RNA is safe and it's really fragile and transient and it doesn't exist in your bloodstream 10 days after you've had the shot, But what about, I mean, now we're talking about a completely different technology. Is this back to like, again, a typical flu shot, or what are we talking about with what's in AstraZeneca and J&J, assuming that they're similar enough that we can kind of put them in the same bucket?
The details are, there's a lot of details.
Yes.
I would invite you to look at the New York Times primer on what's in it.
Okay.
But the J&J and AstraZeneca are both adenoviral vectors, and people are making a lot of noise about the modRNA-based vaccine, but adenoviral vectors are similarly new in practice. We've been doing work and research with them for longer than the modRNA-based, but the bottom line is that both of these technologies have been in trials in humans, not just animals, and have been shown to be without risk, at this point,
short-term
risk. Short-term, but years after the studies, there's been in the animals.
We don't know,
humans,
we don't know decades
no risks
from now.
have presented themselves.
Okay.
But there are details in terms of the delivery of the technology and the way that your immune system sees the actual vector that can lead to complications, like we've been seeing with the thrombocytopenic purpura, where the guy who was...
That was the doctor
who died.
That was with the modRNA. But we haven't been seeing. There was one doctor.
No, but that's the
we
thing.
saw.
I think
yes.
what you'll see in any technology, you get these 1 in a million type frequency cases that won't necessarily show up in trials. And that's not to say that the vaccine's not safe. That's really just speaks to the diversity of immune responses in the human population.
And would you say that kind of fluke, freakish immune response could also happen if exposed to the actual virus?
There have been things that have been observed. I think the more neurological, I think.
Okay.
With the adeno-based. And
Okay.
I think that one of the trials was halted briefly.
Yes.
While they fleshed that out.
But you think I guess what I'm getting at is there any place where the calculus...
risk relative to
the risk of COVID?
There's vaccines out there that we've been using for decades that have similar or greater risk.
Okay.
So I think you have to calibrate it relative to existing technology, and as you were alluding to there, relative to the real threat, active threat of COVID.
Which is COVID.
So it can't be ignored, and I think that really the only chance to find our way out is going to be on a public health level doing these mass inoculations with the J&J and similar vaccines.
Okay, great. So it sounds like, can you just tell us your credentials, sir, very quickly? I butcher it every time I say, just so you guys know, this isn't just my husband.
I think it's important
He's not,
to say
yeah.
I'm not.
Tell us your non-credentials, why you have no business.
Epidemiologist.
He's not a doctor.
I am just a lowly scientist with an advanced degree in molecular vertebrate embryology and training in stem cell research and now reproductive medicine. While we're talking about that, there is really no risk to your fertility.
Yes, I've been hearing a lot about questions about fertility, and this is actually his wheelhouse. He is an expert on fertility, and I have listened into some of his work calls, and there's just a consensus among... Am I allowed to say I've listened into your work calls? Sure. I've listened in one side of them to him. And the bottom line is there's really a consensus that this is not going to be a problem. The vaccine, again, is it possible that there's something no one is foreseeing? This is the world. This is where my mind goes, but it's not really a reasonable fear that there's going to be something that nobody's anticipated and, oh my God, we're all infertile or worse, which is, you guys know how I like to rule things out. And of course, there is no ruling this out. But on a personal note, I haven't posted about this yet, but our nanny unfortunately has COVID right now. You guys have heard me talk a lot about Ina. She is a wonderful person that I am actually quite afraid for now because she is very sick. And we don't know how she got it. We are obviously now quarantining because this was a close exposure. But just to sort of shine a light on... Sorry, I'm talking and looking at you. Just the point is, she is a young, healthy person, and she's really sick with this. So now I am extra in favor of the vaccine. So anyway, hun, thanks. Bye, guys.